Hi, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Well, it's been a kind of an exciting week out at the nest site. Again, just M15 just can't catch a break. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Dick Pritchett Real Estate for having these cameras for us to watch. Then I also want to shout out to Lady Hawk. Uh, I get some of my updates off of her channels, especially overnight stuff, maybe some stuff I missed. So for some of y'all who haven't checked out Lady Hawk's channel, check her out. All right, so let's start with Sunday, 2/19. This is going to be through the 19th through the 25th. 5 a.m. I get up, which is 6 o'clock Florida time. The intruder is not in the attic. Oh, wait a minute. The intruder and M15 are on the attic porch. Excuse me. We've got a name for this intruder. It's R23-3. I'm going to refer to her quite a bit as the intruder, and then we'll start calling her by her actual name later. So at 6:45, M15 leaves, and he leaves the intruder in the attic perch and takes off. She flies off shortly after him. She comes back about 8:45 a.m. and I see her up in the nest tree eating on a rabbit. And it made me wonder if she didn't steal that rabbit from M15, but she ends up leaving, eating that rabbit and leaving around 9:15. So M15 returns to the nest with breakfast at 10:51 or 10:35 a.m. 21 pretty much so gets most of that breakfast. 22 doesn't really get anything. Then M15 returns again at 12:26 with a fish again. And this time 22 does get a good feed out of it. M15 and the intruder both return back to the nest at about 1:35 p.m. The intruder tries to steal the fish and at first is not successful. And 21 and 22 get a little fish. But then the intruder comes back and eventually she does steal the fish and push M15 out of the nest. It was kind of a push out of the nest. He kind of let her. I kind of felt like he just was like, okay, you can have that fish. I'll just go and get another one. All right, she eats the fish and goes up into the nest tree. And then M15 returns at 3:30 with another fish and feeds 21 and 22. Okay? And then he also returns with a small UFO that I really couldn't tell what it was, and that was shortly after he had brought the fish. 21 got most of that UFO, and 22 might have got some scraps of it. M15, M15 and the intruder returned to the nest tree at about 5:15 p.m. and they roost for the night. Around 11 p.m. that evening, there is an owl strike on the female intruder in the nest tree. Knocks her out of the tree, but she ends up flying back to the tree and roosts in the attic perch after the strike. Monday, 2:20. Monday's a little bit of a slower day. I see M15 in the attic, and there's no intruder, so she left overnight. M15 returns to the nest about 10:50 with what looked like a pretty good-sized catfish. And 21 and 22 both got to eat breakfast. M15 returns at about 3:50 p.m. with a fish, and 21 and 22 both get what I call the late lunch, but they both did eat. Okay, then about 4:15, I see M15 and the intruder down at the pond drinking water. It looked like the intruder might have gotten startled by a horse. She flew up into one of the trees, and I saw M15 fly up into the tree and roost with her for a little bit before he flew over to the nest tree. They ended up roosting about 6:30. The female intruder ended up flying off about 9 p.m. And about 9:20, you guessed it, M15 gets struck by an owl. For some of you that wondering about some of these owl strikes, I found out from another channel, Ladyhawk's channel, there is a great horned owl's nest on this same property. The nests are only about 500 feet apart. So that's why there's been more owl strikes this year than in past years. The owls do this to try to deter the bald eagles, try to get them to leave the area. As we know, M15 is very resilient. He's not leaving the area. Okay. Brings us to Tuesday, the 21st. Tuesday, the 21st. Somewhat a slow day. I would call that day not a good feeding day for the kids. I see M15 in the attic perch at about 6 a.m. He takes off at his usual time, which is between 6:30 and 7 usually. M15 returns at about 9:45, and both the kids get fed. It looked like a pretty good sized fish. Then M15 returns to the nest at 3 p.m. with looked like to me a partially eaten fish carcass. 21 gets most of that. 22 gets some scraps, but not much. And then M15 pretty much took the rest of the day off. He got a really good bath. And when I say a good bath, he was in the water for a good 15-20 minutes. I'd never probably seen a bald eagle take a bath like that. First of all, I was really surprised at how far out into the water he was. And then that he was going completely underwater, and just the way he was bathing, like he was trying to swim or fly in the water. It was cool looking. It was really cool. And then he spent the rest of the day flying from tree to tree on the nest tree site, kind of roosting and drying off his wings. He'd have them hanging opened, and he ended up roosting at about 6:35 p.m., but he did drop down in the attic, or in the nest briefly, and picked on some scraps before he flew back up to the perch at 6:46 p.m. And when I went to sleep, he was by himself Tuesday. Wednesday ends up being a pretty exciting day, all in all. M15's on the attic perch at 6 a.m. There's no R23-3 is not with him. M15 returns to the nest site the first time at 8:30 a.m. With a fish. 21 gets most of that fish, but 22 gets a little. M15 returns at 11:13 a.m. with another fish. 21 and 22 both eat. M15 returns at 12:52 p.m. with a fish. 21 and 22 both eat. As a matter of fact, 22 steals the entire tail end of that fish and swallows the whole thing down. Okay. Then M15 returns at 2:04 p.m. with a fish. 21 eats and 22 eats. And M15 eats a little bit. At 2:43, the intruder lands in the nest tree. M15 and her flew off. And then M15 returns at 3:12 with a fish. 22 and M15 eat most of that fish. 21 doesn't even get up, he just sleeps. I see the intruder return to the nest at about 3:50, and I see her eating scraps out of the nest, which is a little concerning. She ends up taking off a little after 4 o'clock. At 4:12 p.m., M15 and the intruder return. M15 has a fish, and the intruder pushes him away and steals his fish and eats it. But that was his 6th fish of the day, and I was like, you know what? Let her have it. Just go get you another fish. And that's exactly what he did. He returns at 5:07 p.m. 21 and Dad both eat. 22 was just so full from earlier feeds, he just slept through it all. So the female intruder and him returned to the attic about 6:35 p.m. And it appears that maybe, well, it doesn't appear that maybe, she gave him a mating call, and dangummit, he jumped up on her back for a couple seconds. And yes, he mounted her. I mean, she gave him, it was the clear mating call. He clearly hopped up on her back. Luckily, he was only up there for a couple seconds, and then they went back to roosting at 6:38 p.m. That brings us to Thursday. Thursday was kind of a bummer of a day. I see M15 and R23 in the attic perch at 6 a.m. M15 and R23 return to the nest at 8:26 a.m. M15 has a fish. They get into a big fight over this fish. This fight lasts about 5 minutes. There's speed flying around the pasture. He's going back and forth from the nest and flying. He's trying to keep this fish from her. But ultimately, she steals this fish from him. And she eats the fish. And then M15 spends pretty much so the rest of the day up in the nest tree, y'all. He didn't go back out the rest of the day. I saw him up there at 1:53 p.m. He stayed up there till 5:07 p.m. when he flew, it looked like to me, over the pond, landed in a tree on the other side of the pond, stayed there about 10 minutes and flew back to the attic tree where he perched for the night. R23-3 returned to the tree with him for a little bit, but then she ended up flying off, and I didn't see her come back for the night. And I really felt like he kind of gave her the cold shoulder when she did come back. I don't think he was very happy with her that day. Why do I think he didn't go back out that day? And then for a half a day Friday, he didn't come back until 1 o'clock Friday, which we're going to Friday now. But why do I think that he took a day and a half off from hunting and fishing? Oh, I think the boy spent way too much energy trying to keep that fish from her. You know, he spent 5 minutes of what I would call a lot of energy, a lot of fast flying, a lot of tug-of-warring with her. I just felt like it probably toasted him for the rest of the day. He probably got tired, and all he could do was sit in the nest tree the rest of the day. So that brings us to Friday. When I get up Friday, M15 is in the attic at 6 a.m. and there's no R23-3. However, he does call her in at about 7:03 a.m. and they both flew off at around 7:30. M15 doesn't return to the nest until 1 p.m. with a fish. And this is a drop off. He just leaves the fish there and, I guess you'd say 21 eats most of that fish and 22 gets some leftovers. Then M15 returns at 1:53 p.m. with what looked like to me a fish carcass. And this again was a drop off. 21 eats most of that carcass, 22 got some scraps. All right, then M15 returns to the nest at 3:15 with what looked like a water bird carcass or like a water bird baby. It was pretty good sized. M15 does start to feed 21 and 22. But 22 steals most of that bird and gets most of it. So I'd say that over that day, it was an okay food day. It wasn't looking like it was going to be a very good day for 22 till he got that bird. Okay. It looked like it was kind of a restless night for M15. He kept kind of flying off the attic perch, and I don't know whether he was getting disturbed by something down on the street or the road, but he finally returned back to the attic perch about 8:14 p.m. and settled in for the night. Something was disturbing him out there. I'm not sure what it was. Okay, that brings us to Saturday, 2:25 at 6 a.m. I see M15 in the attic, and there's no R23-3. M15 leaves at 6:50 a.m. M15 returns at 8:34 with a fish. He just leaves it in the nest. 21 and 22 try to eat that fish, but it's an armored catfish. And they just can't get it open, y'all. They just can't get in it. Okay? So it ends up rotting in the nest, unfortunately, a whole catfish. Okay? M15 returns a little bit later at about 11 a.m. with a fish. 21 eats most of that fish. 22 gets very little. M15 returns to the nest at 12:04 p.m. was a UFO to me. I couldn't tell what it was. It looked like maybe some liver or gizzards of something. It looked like to me 21 ate most of that. 22 might got a little bit. And then M15 and R23 return to the nest tree at 1 p.m. with a fish. She steals that fish, but she does something incredible, y'all. She feeds 21 some of that fish. I could not believe what I saw. It was incredible. I would have never thought that she would have fed one of those fish. Fed those babies some of that fish. Okay, now if we could just get her to go get a fish herself and bring it back to the nest and feed the kids, we'd have something. Okay, because to me she's still a thief and she's still thieving his fish. Go get your own fish, come back and feed the kids, and I'll call you a surrogate mother then, but not until then. Okay. M15 returns to the nest at about 3:39 p.m. with a fish, and 22 finally gets a good meal. 21 gets some of it, but 22 at this point was very hungry and pretty much so kept 21 behind him. So 22 got a good feeding out of that last fish. basically, that's the end of the night. M15 roosts up in the tree at about 6:30 p.m. He flew down to the pond, got a drink, and came back at 6:36 p.m. And that was about it for the night. So, all in all, I do think we're still on track for these two to fly away. We had some oh my God moment where he mounted her briefly, where she made the mating call to him and bent down like she did, and he hopped up on top of her. Then the oh my God moment Saturday where she feeds 21. That really did surprise me, y'all. I didn't think she would feed his kids. But that doesn't make her a surrogate mother, y'all. We still got to get her to start bringing food to this nest. Okay? And she has not done that yet. We have not seen that. And I don't know if we will see it. That completes the review for the week of the 19th through the 25th. Hey, if you like this video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Thanks to everybody who's watched these videos. I really appreciate it. I can't thank y'all enough. So, we'll have another review next week. Looking forward to it. Take care. Everybody, thanks a lot for coming along on the ride with me.